있습니다. 그걸 두고 국힘당 최고위원 김재원 4.3의 격이 낮은 기념일이라 참석 의무가 없다고 막말 내뱉었습니다. 하루가 멀다하고 막말의 역사를 올립니다. 용서할 수 있습니까? 윤석열이 프로야구 개막에 맞춰서 시구하러 갔는데 급이 높아서 시구하러 갔습니까?
Hello, this is Beek Pyong, a YouTube channel specializing in political commentary. Currently, large-scale rallies are held every Saturday in Korea. The reason why such large-scale rallies are taking place in Korea is that the president is habitually talking about liberal democracy as if he were crazy, but he is taking the lead in destroying liberal democratic values, order and systems. Korea has historically maintained a bad relationship with neighboring Japan, while members of the international community, in most cases, are ending bad relations and developing bilateral relations through cooperative and friendly relations. Japan, unlike Germany, has no remorse for past war crimes and human rights abuses through aggression. During and before World War II, Japan had committed crimes such as forcibly capturing Koreans, kidnapping them in mines or areas where physical labor was needed, imprisoning them and enslaving them until they died, and then burying them alive when they got sick or got older. The Korean victims, who survived dramatically, fought legal battles for more than 30 years and eventually won the case by the Korean judiciary and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Korea ruled that Mitsubishi Corporation, a Japanese war criminal company, should compensate Koreans for damages to victims of forced mobilization. As a result, the Japanese war criminal company Mitsubishi's assets in Korea were ordered to be prohibited and seized. However, Japan denies all of its faults on the grounds that if it had not been defeated by the US, it would have continued to exploit Koreans by labor and sex. This can also be seen as a violation of international law. Japan's unilateral denial of Korea's judicial rulings, despite international practice of respecting the rulings of the other country's judiciary based on reciprocity, can be seen as Japan still adhering to its past line of aggression, which should still be seen as denying women's and basic human rights. The problem is that Japan's anti-democratic political activities are not unique to Japan. The same problem is piling up in Korea. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is suppressing freedom of press. The problem is that the head of the administration has a duty to defend the value and order of the Constitution by completely denying the judiciary's ruling, but the administration arbitrarily broke down the compensation order. Whether it's a democracy or communism, all political ideologies, like all other values and philosophies, will deteriorate over time, aging and fading, and the side effects will get bigger and bigger. This is also the law of nature. That is why all social or ideological systems and environments require periodic management and inspection. Otherwise, dictatorships will always monopolize power, suppress the people, and shatter the values of freedom and equality. In that case, the people have to use their right of resistance to overthrow the dictator. As you can see in the video, tens of thousands of citizens are gathering in Korea to shout for the resignation of Yoon Suk-yeol. It's been about 200 years since liberal democracy spread around the world, and there are quite a few countries that are less than 100 years old. The idea that the people are the original owners of state power is really attractive. It's certainly attractive enough to admit. But the concept of democracy is still extremely unstable. The reality of these unstable democracies is comparable to that of the divine right of kings. It's the modern version of indulgence that's being swept under the carpet. One of the most recent hot incidents is the Daejangdong 5 billion won club in Korea. They said that after forming a private organization called Chunhadangjin, former media reporters, accountants, lawyers, incumbent prosecutors, judges, and businessmen, they organized real estate speculation projects. They have attracted judges and prosecutors to illegal real estate speculation in case the media, civic groups, or investigative agencies open an investigation after obtaining information about their illegal dumping. if a prosecutor is involved, he or she can be found not guilty through poor investigation and prosecution, and if the prosecutor who bribed him or her fails to do anything about the case, even if he or she is indicted, he or she will be acquitted through a judge who has already included him. Events like this are flooding in. Nevertheless, most countries do not have a referendum system for the judiciary. This is the issue that the public should pay attention to. The reason why large-scale rallies are held every weekend in Korea can be summarized as follows. The first problem is that the current president of Yoon Suk-yeol is destroying liberal democracy. During the presidential election, he made a fuss about protecting liberal democracy, but when he was elected, MBC reporters were penalized for not being able to board a presidential plane, just because they reported President Yoon Suk-yeol's diplomatic mistakes and publicly cracked down on the media. To make matters worse, the president made a fuss with reporters on his way to work from home to Yong-san's office, and then announced the morning press conference when the broadcaster reported to U.S. President Joe Biden, "What if the U.S. lawmakers throw away the budget?" As the media at home and abroad have already reported, it is known that Yoon Suk-yeol mocked U.S. President Joe Biden behind his back. And it's also true that Yoon Suk-yeol called U.S. lawmakers pups. MBC, a Korean public broadcaster, only reported the same thing that was already reported abroad. However, the Yoon Suk-yeol government criticized, suppressed MBC. In addition, after former President Park Geun-hye was impeached and resigned from the presidency, he was convicted of various crimes and imprisoned, and millions of citizens rushed to the square to participate in rallies calling for the impeachment of Park Geun-hye. According to rumors at the time, former President Park Geun-hye was mentally ruled by a pseudo-religious leader like Choi Tae-min, and he committed serious crimes of state affairs, such as entrusting his best friend Choi Soon-sil, and now renamed Choi So. The problem is that there are very strong suspicions that President Yoon Suk-yeol is going the same way, as the President and First Lady are being ruled by a pseudo-religious leader nicknamed Chin Gong. 159 young people have been killed in the Itaewon disaster last year due to irresponsible government assistance, raising suspicions that they are listening to crazy calls to promote Korea to the international community. Such nonsense was publicly transmitted through a YouTube broadcast called The Political Law Era, and the video of the problem is still being released. People are very seriously despairing about the recurrence of serious state manipulation because the president seems to be instructed by a YouTuber named Chin Gong, who immediately sets the same state policy as the Korean president when he broadcasts on YouTube. Not only that, but most people feel that obscene photos of the First Lady are being posted on the president's official website, and Taiwan's public broadcaster is mocking the Korean president as ruining the country, the main character of a diplomatic disaster, and the shaman is dominating the nation's president and the First Lady. This has also been covered by British public broadcasters. That's why citizens are participating in large-scale rallies. The Japanese imperialism committed a human rights destruction crime during World War II, which was the forced mobilization of the Japanese imperialism. In the process of developing the mine, Koreans were forcibly transported, imprisoned on the island, and forced to work, but if they did not obey, they were killed. He even forced them to work and didn't give them food properly, exploited Koreans like consumables, and stabbed them with bamboo spears to death, saying that if they were sick or injured, it would be a waste of bullets. Let's take a brief look at the forced mobilization of Japanese imperialists. Let me tell you what it means to be a conscriptive worker victim of forced mobilization. During the war, Japan forced about 800,000 Koreans from colonial Joseon to Japan in various forms, such as recruitment, corporate mediation, and employment, and then forced them to work in coal mines and military factories. The government made a labor mobilization plan, and companies used the power of government constitution to mobilize them in a systematic manner. This is called forced mobilization of Koreans. A man in law is a forced mobilized person. It is also written in Mitsubishi-sa as 12,913 conscripts of Korean peninsulares as of August 1945. in the labor field, wage arrears, forced savings, arrest and surveillance, overwork and abuse were rampant. The International Labor Organization ILO recognizes Japan's forced mobilization as a violation of the Forced Labor Treaty and recommends the Japanese government to rescue the victims. Abe says it's a worker from the old Korean peninsula issue, a remark intended to mislead the history of forced labor. Let me explain Korea's ruling on draft. The Supreme Court's ruling on compensation for forced mobilization. In 2018, the Supreme Court of Korea recognized the right to claim alimony for damages caused by forced labor, considering forced labor as an illegal act against humanitarian rule by Japanese companies directly related to Japan's illegal colonial rule and the conduct of war of aggression. Regarding the claim that the Korea-Japan Claims Agreement was resolved, the Korea-Japan Agreement resolved the civil and financial bond debt relationship between the two countries, and claims for anti-humanitarian illegal activities were not included in the Korea-Japan Claims Agreement. Accordingly, the Supreme Court ordered Japan Steel and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to compensate victims of forced mobilization. Nevertheless, the Japanese war criminal government is now lying to the Japanese people and citizens of other countries, saying it has been completely and ultimately resolved. That's what the claim agreement says. The Japanese government made the Korean government give up its claim instead of giving it economic cooperation. But it is the diplomatic right under international law that has extinguished. An individual's claim cannot be extinguished by interstate commitments. The Japanese government has also repeatedly said that individual claims have not expired. Answered by the Upper House Budget Committee, Yanichi, director of the Foreign Affairs Treaty on August 27, 1991, and individual claims have expired. Answer by Foreign Minister Taro Kono on November 14, 2018. Hisashi Ohata, secretary of the Treaty Bureau of the Foreign Ministry 1965, also said that even if he wanted to extinguish it in terms of policy, theoretically, the extinction was originally strange. Damages for illegal activities are unresolved. The Japanese war criminal government is protesting that the compensation has been completed with $500 million paid to Korea, but are you asking me to pay again? The compensation is not over yet. The Japanese government claims colonial rule is legitimate and refuses to compensate Korea. Japan's $500 million free, $300 million paid $200 million to Korea is economic cooperation and not compensation. In addition, for 10 years, Japanese produce and Japanese services were provided, and no cash was paid. The place of use was also unable to compensate victims of forced mobilization due to the restriction that it should help the economic development of Korea. Meanwhile, $500 million in aid to Korea was an opportunity for Japanese companies to enter Korea again, and it also benefited Japan. It is true that the South Korean government demanded a lump sum payment of compensation during the Korea-Japan talks, and that the payment to each individual was made by the South Korean government. However, in the end, the Japanese government did not pay cash to Korea. Nevertheless, the Korean government enacted the Civil Claims Compensation Act against Japan in 1974 and the Support Act for Victims of Forced Mobilization before and after the Pacific War in 2007 to compensate victims of forced mobilization. However, this is not compensation for illegal activities called forced mobilization. The Japanese government and Japanese companies that mobilize force are still not responsible for illegal activities. In the case of forced Chinese arrest, Kashima Construction, Hanaoka Reconciliation, Nishimatsu Construction, and Mitsubishi Materials acknowledged the forced arrest, apologized to the victim, and set up a fund to compensate the victim. Germany, which committed forced labor during wartime, established a memory, responsibility, and future fund in 2000 jointly funded by governments and companies and compensated about 1.7 million victims. This is a valuable experience aimed at a comprehensive solution to the problem of forced mobilization. A comprehensive solution is possible if you learn from precedent. There are currently thousands of victims of forced mobilization in Korea. We need to solve the problem as a whole, while they're alive. To do so, the government and civil society must squeeze wisdom together and find solutions that victims can understand and accept. Establishing a foundation or fund for forced mobilization, damage, relief, is an urgent priority. Nevertheless, Yoon Suk-yeol, Korea's pro-Japanese president, has bowed to the history-distorting Japanese war criminal government and announced an agreement against the will of the Korean victims. That's why democratic citizens are pouring out into the square with candles and holding large-scale rallies. The second reason is the prosecution's fabricated investigation. Korea has carried out prosecution reform for the past 5 years, and the pro-Japanese Traitor Liberty Korea Party has tried to paralyze the National Assembly by abusing filibuster to block the passage of the prosecution reform bill, imprisoning Chun Jun by using violence and using heavy equipment to forcibly destroy the office. The future United Party, the successor party to the Liberty Korea Party, announced several pledges in preparation for the parliamentary election, including Japan's aggressive forces and self-defense forces could land on Korean territory in case of emergency, and Japan, a third country, will be added to the Joint Chiefs of Staff's wartime operations. Japan's 36 years of forced colonization and occupation of Korea with its past aggression, including sex crimes, murder, looting, women's adultery, confinement, sexual assault, and rape, theft, robbery, Holocaust crimes, animal abuse, infanticide, torture, and defamation. Yoon Suk-yeol's president is betraying the people and the country and abusing state power like a Japanese servant, despite committing a cruel crime that humans dare not imagine and are proud of. For this reason, the Korean people are holding large-scale candlelight vigils because they believe that they cannot live like this. The problem does not stop there. South Korean prosecutors have no evidence, as they have written a novel-like indictment that does not fit at all, creating false testimony and fabricating evidence to kill their political rivals and eventually pushing ahead with the indictment. Even though he was already acquitted by the Supreme Court's ruling in 2019, he investigated and indicted the same case again, ignoring the grand principle of double jeopardy. This is an illegal and anti-constitutional investigation solely for the removal of political opponents. That's why democratic citizens are holding large-scale rallies. The reason why the Korean prosecution can indict innocent politicians and people through fabricated investigations while destroying the constitution is that Korea has not completed the liquidation of pro-Japanese traitors. And in the middle was the United States. The US has hindered Koreans from punishing pro-Japanese groups for their anti-ethnic activities and again has controlled Korea from behind, playing politics that divide Korea for more than 70 years while keeping those anti-ethnic and anti-national pro-Japanese groups in their hands and feet. That's why Koreans with some knowledge don't feel good about the US either. The pro-Japanese forces used to control Koreans during Japan's forced occupation of Korea. When Japan withdrew from Korea after losing the war, the US again divided and controlled Korea by hiring a large number of pro-Japanese groups who betrayed Koreans and became Japan's frontmen and trampled on their relatives. Koreans are still fighting hard today to make a normal future by correcting such a cruel, sad and unjust past and present. Candlelight action rallies are the pride of Korean citizens. We have been holding rallies, demonstrations, and street marches in a peaceful way through deep consideration and reflection for a very long time, as an acting democratic citizen. To correct historical distortions, protect the fundamental rights of the people, the values and order of the democratic constitution, and protect the sovereignty of the Republic of Korea, the assembly continues every weekend, even in the harsh winter of the blade. Democratic citizens do not hold candlelight vigils simply to impeach Yoon Suk-yeol, a constitutional destroyer and national traitor. They're showing how citizens in democracies behave politically. Korean citizens say, "We are sovereign and defenders of liberal democracy." I'll stop here for today. Thanks for watching. If you want to continue watching the news, please subscribe. This has been Big Pyong, a political commentary channel.